Hey everybody, this is Andy Bennett with the CSS News Civil War Interpretive Center. This is video 3 of our Civil War Diseases series. We've talked about communicable diseases in video 1. In video 2, food and water contaminants. And we're going to talk about one of the other big killers transmitted by those, you guessed it, pesky mosquitoes. Okay, in recent years, we've heard about Zika and West Nile virus transmitted by mosquitoes. The two other mosquito transmitted diseases during the Civil War time period, one is malaria. The mosquito that transmit malaria in the Aegypti family comes from Africa. And in its name, it has been transmitted out of Africa to anywhere in the world where it was warm enough for mosquitoes to thrive. The ancient Egyptians had to deal with malaria. The ancient Romans had to deal with malaria. And it is transported to the New World through the slave trade from Africa. Malaria is a blood parasite. A female mosquito with the parasites in her bites you, transmits it to you. So at the time of the Civil War, almost everyone in the South had malaria. And once you get malaria during the time of the Civil War, you cannot get rid of it. All you can do is treat the symptoms. Most people in the northern climes where it's colder, where the frost and freezing kills off mosquitoes, didn't really have to suffer from malaria. Luckily, we found something in the New World, something called Peruvian bark, the bark of a tree that grows in the Caribbean and Central and South America. It has quinine in it. Quinine helps kill off some of the parasites. The concentrations that were used during the Civil War weren't enough to really completely kill off the parasite, so it just helped you deal with the symptoms. You got fevers, you got chills, you had vomiting. It made you very tired feeling, so it really drained the energy of people with it. During the Civil War, lots of soldiers who came from the Northeast came to Louisiana, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and picked up malaria, and they'd have took it back and suffered through it the rest of their lives. But malaria can be fatal. 30,000 soldiers during the Civil War died of malaria. Imagine if you're already have a wound or another sickness or another parasite, and you throw malaria on top of that with the vomiting. You already have dysentery or diarrhea, and you're already having diarrhea and vomiting, and you're adding something on top of that. It can be lethal. During the Civil War, the Confederacy was cut off, blockaded, so they couldn't bring in a lot of that quinine from Central South America and other places where they were manufactured in a medical form. So they went looking for alternatives, alternative medicine. A physician and researcher from South Carolina came up with a book. He compiled uses of native plants. It's called Southern Fields and Forest. In that book, he had come up with one was a family story passed down from a friend of his, and then through further research, found the bark of dogwood was useful in helping with the symptoms of malaria. One of the other things he said was on the Santee River, French Huguenots, when South Carolina was first being settled, suggested taking a dogwood berry, dried dogwood berries, a couple a day to keep the fevers away. So that's one thing that pharmacists and chemists and doctors, since they didn't have quinine to give to civilians and soldiers, they would get them, dry them out, and they could sell you some dogwood berries to hopefully help you with your malaria symptoms. The other big mosquito-borne thing is yellow fever. Yellow fever is a virus, and it is very deadly at the time of the Civil War. Yellow fever outbreaks typically pop up in ports. In 1862, in the port of Wilmington here in North Carolina, There was outbreak yellow fever that stopped the construction of the CSS North Carolina and CSS Raleigh being built there. People didn't know what was causing it, so they typically fled these areas. It popped up in New Orleans and all across the south southern ports. The mosquito from Africa had come over, and it needed to be in particularly hot tropical environments like Brazil to support these mosquitoes. So ships that had went from Brazil to the Caribbean, most of the blockading supplies came in from England and France and went to Caribbean islands, and then ships would bring them into these southern ports. Brazil was a key source of dyeing material for uniforms, so ships would bring people with yellow fever or yellow fever mosquitoes that would come into port. What yellow fever does is it starts attacking your liver, your kidneys, right? You have internal bleeding, you have fevers, chills, loss of appetite, nausea, headaches, body pain, and your skin turns yellow, your eyes become yellow because your liver is not being able to process out the iron because it's under attack from this virus. Obviously, with internal bleeding, your liver and kidney shutting down, it's very lethal. Yellow fever would pop back up all across the world and across the South. John Bell Hood, the general from the Civil War, lost his wife and children in a yellow fever outbreak after the Civil War. So malaria and yellow fever, they both still exist today, but particularly yellow fever is very limited to Brazil and certain parts of Africa. Malaria is still around different places. After the Civil War, especially during the construction of the Panama Canal and other things, we went through the process of trying to kill off malaria mosquitoes. We have quinine today and different medications we take to get rid of malaria. Soldiers, if they're going into tropical climes, whether it's World War II, Vietnam, we took malarial pills. Soldiers deployed today take malarial medications to keep them from getting malaria. So when those mosquitoes are buzzing around this summer, you don't got to worry about getting yellow fever. You don't got to worry about getting malaria. But just remember, all those soldiers suffering through everything else, the combat, the fatigue of marching, were under attack by this hidden army. I hope you're enjoying these videos and look for another one real soon. Always check out our videos on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. See you soon.